You know the movie. You've probably seen it more times than you can count. But here's the thing, there's a lot about the real Ghostbusters that most of us never knew. Today we're diving into some genuinely wild behind-the-scenes stories that will have you seeing this classic in a whole new way. So stick around as we uncover 15 wild facts you never knew about the real Ghostbusters. Fact 15. The Marshmallow Man almost didn't happen. When Ivan Reitman and the filmmakers were shooting that iconic final act, they weren't entirely sure they'd include the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. The idea came from a childhood memory one of the writers had, seeing a giant marshmallow advertisement in Times Square during the 1950s. But bringing that concept to life on screen was an absolutely massive undertaking that required extensive planning and resources. The practical effects team had to construct an enormous costume, and they weren't entirely convinced it would actually work when they filmed it. The engineering challenges alone were substantial, and there were serious discussions about whether the idea was even feasible given the limitations of 1984 special effects technology. What's remarkable is that this unplanned, almost accidental creation became one of the most memorable movie monsters ever put on film. The fact that something so iconic nearly didn't exist because nobody was sure it would work on camera is pretty incredible when you think about it. If the filmmakers had decided it was too risky or too expensive, the entire ending of the movie would have been completely different. The Stay Puft Marshmallow Man appears for only a few minutes, yet it's the image everyone remembers. That's the mark of something truly special in cinema. Fact 14. Bill Murray didn't actually want the part. Bill Murray was initially skeptical about taking on the role of Peter Venkman. He was worried the movie would be too silly and that starring in a comedy about catching ghosts might damage his credibility as an actor who wanted to be taken seriously. Murray had recently done some dramatic work, and he was concerned that this project could pigeonhole him into comedy roles for the rest of his career. He even said no at first when Ivan Reitman approached him about the part. It took some serious convincing from Reitman to get him interested, and even then, Murray was hesitant about the commitment. Today, it's impossible to imagine anyone else in that role, but Murray almost walked away from the whole project entirely. His reluctance actually worked in the film's favor. He brought a natural, effortless quality to Venkman that probably wouldn't have existed if someone else had desperately wanted the part or was trying too hard to prove something. Murray's confidence and his willingness to play things straight, even when the situations were absurd, gave the character authenticity. He treated outlandish, ghost-busting scenarios with the same matter-of-fact approach a real person might use, which made everything feel grounded and believable. Fact 13. Dan Aykroyd based Raymond's stance on real parapsychology. Dan Aykroyd didn't just make up the character of Raymond Stantz out of thin air. He actually spent considerable time researching real parapsychology and spent countless hours consulting with actual paranormal researchers and scientists who studied unexplained phenomena. Aykroyd was genuinely interested in the subject matter, and he wanted to bring authenticity to the role beyond just reading the script. He interviewed experts, read technical papers, and immersed himself in the world of paranormal investigation. This level of commitment to character research was unusual for a comedy film in the 1980s. Aykroyd wanted his character's earnestness about the paranormal to come from a place of genuine knowledge, not just acting. His character's enthusiasm and technical knowledge of ghost-catching equipment and paranormal theory wasn't just made up. It was grounded in real research and real conversations with people who actually study these phenomena. This commitment to authenticity gave Stantz a believability that made him compelling even when he was discussing completely fictional ghost-catching equipment and supernatural theories. The audience could sense that Aykroyd actually understood what he was talking about, even if the subject matter itself was fantastical. Fact 12. The Ecto-1 was supposed to be a hearse. The production team had different ideas for the Ghostbusters vehicle when they were in early planning stages. Originally, they considered using an actual hearse as the Ecto-1, which made sense from multiple angles. It made thematic sense since they were dealing with death and the supernatural, and it would have been considerably cheaper to modify an existing hearse than to find and customize the 1959 Cadillac ambulance they ultimately chose. The budget for vehicles was limited, and a hearse would have been a practical solution that required minimal modifications. However, the filmmakers ultimately felt that the Cadillac limousine had more personality and character than a traditional hearse would provide. They wanted the vehicle to feel like something special, something that stood out on the streets of New York. That decision turned out to be absolutely perfect. The Ecto-1 became as iconic as the characters themselves, with its distinctive design, color scheme, and overall presence. It's hard to imagine the Ghostbusters driving around in a hearse when you think about the film's final product. Sometimes the best creative choices come from trusting your instincts over the practical, economical options. Fact 11. Sigourney Weaver almost played Gozer. Possession completely differently. Sigourney Weaver's performance as Dana Barrett, especially in those unsettling scenes where she's possessed by Gozer, was actually supposed to be much more grotesque and alien in the original concept. The filmmakers considered having her speak in an otherworldly voice, twist her body into impossible positions, and move in increasingly inhuman and disturbing ways when possessed by the supernatural entity. They wanted audiences to see her as something no longer human, but rather a vessel for an alien intelligence. It would have been visually shocking and deeply unsettling in a different way than what they ultimately filmed. Weaver actually talked them out of this approach, arguing passionately that Dana's psychological horror and the audience's emotional connection to her would be far more effective if viewers could still recognize the human being struggling underneath the possession. She believed that restraint and subtlety would create more genuine fear than grotesque transformation would. She was absolutely right about this creative choice. Her subtle, unsettling performance became far more effective and genuinely disturbing than if they'd gone with the over-the-top, completely alien possession approach. The scenes work because we can see Dana fighting against something she doesn't understand, and that human struggle is what makes it truly frightening. Fact 10. The Slimer special effects took 3 months to perfect. That iconic moment when Slimer flies through Peter Venkman's body and leaves him soaking wet? That wasn't a quick effect to create or something they got right on the first try. The special effects team spent 3 full months perfecting how Slimer would look, move, and interact with the environment and the actors. The ghost's design went through dozens of iterations before they landed on the final version that appeared in the film. They had to figure out how Slimer would move, how fast he should travel, what he should sound like, and how he would interact with solid objects and people. What makes this even more impressive is that this work happened in 1984 when they were doing it, using technology that today seems almost primitive by modern standards. They didn't have computers to create the effect. This was practical effects, puppetry, and optical compositing. The fact that they spent so much time perfecting something that appears on screen for just a few seconds shows the incredible level of craftsmanship and attention to detail that went into every single aspect of this film. No detail was too small to care about. Fact 9. Ernie Hudson almost didn't survive to the third act. Ernie Hudson's character, Winston Zeddemore, was actually written to be killed off halfway through the film in early drafts of the script. The original script had him getting zapped by a ghost or killed in some other supernatural encounter around the midpoint of the story, which would have been a shocking moment for audiences. However, test audiences responded so positively to Hudson's warmth, humor, and likability that the filmmakers decided to keep him alive through to the end. This was an excellent creative decision that improved the final film substantially. Winston becomes the audience's surrogate in the movie. He's the one who arrives at the firehouse asking all the reasonable questions we'd all ask if we suddenly had to fight ghosts for a living. He's the everyman in a situation that's completely extraordinary. Losing that perspective halfway through the film would have weakened it considerably. Hudson's character provides comic relief without ever being the butt of the joke. and his genuine concern and competence made him essential to the story. His survival meant that audiences had someone relatable to follow through to the climax. Fact 8. The ecto-containment unit was named after real scientific concepts. The Ghostbusters ecto-containment unit wasn't just a made-up name that sounded cool. Production designer John DeQueer drew inspiration from actual scientific equipment, electrical engineering terminology, and real containment protocols when naming the device and designing its appearance. The name sounds genuinely technical and believable because it was actually based on real terminology used in electrical systems, scientific research facilities, and industrial containment equipment. This attention to making the fictional technology sound authentically scientific was a crucial part of what made audiences willing to buy into the whole premise. The equipment in the firehouse didn't look like typical Hollywood science fiction nonsense with flashing lights and silly props. It looked like something that engineers and scientists might actually build if they needed to contain dangerous entities. The designers used real industrial aesthetics, authentic materials, and genuine technical design principles when creating the equipment. This grounding in reality made the Ghostbusters technology feel credible and believable, which in turn made the entire concept of the film feel more plausible to audiences. Fact 7. The library ghost wasn't originally supposed to be gross. That librarian ghost who absolutely terrifies and scares the life out of our heroes in the opening sequence had a very different design and appearance in earlier versions of the script and concept art. She was originally conceived to be somewhat elegant, refined, and mysterious, less grotesque and physically disturbing, more ethereal, ghostly, and spiritual in overall appearance. The initial creative concept was that ghosts might be beautiful or peaceful, serene beings who weren't necessarily horrifying monsters. Perhaps they could be tragic, elegant, or even sympathetic figures. However, the filmmakers realized during the development process that a more disturbing, physical, and genuinely unsettling ghost design would be far scarier and considerably more effective at creating genuine dread. Her ultimate transformation into that morphing, shape-shifting, constantly changing, deeply unsettling specter made her one of the most genuinely frightening and memorable moments in the entire film. That opening scene does something truly remarkable that few horror comedies achieve. It makes you uncomfortable in the best way possible, which is exactly what the filmmakers wanted the audience to feel in that moment. By starting with a truly creepy, unsettling encounter between the Ghostbusters and something genuinely terrifying, they establish and set the proper tone for the entire movie experience. The audience understands immediately and intuitively that this isn't going to be a light, fun, silly romp with no stakes. There's genuine danger present and genuine horror lurking in this supernatural world, even if the overall comedic tone of the film remains prevalent throughout. Fact 6. The Ghostbusters theme was recorded in just 2 days. Ray Parker Jr.'s absolutely iconic theme song was recorded and completed incredibly quickly when you consider its enormous cultural impact and remarkable longevity in popular culture. Parker and the production team came together, worked out the basic concept, melody, and structure, and completed the entire recording, arrangement, and mixing process in just 2 remarkable days. The song was written, fully arranged, performed with all instrumentation, recorded, and then mixed to completion in that incredibly short time frame. When you consider how much the song has lasted in popular culture, and how completely synonymous it has become with the entire Ghostbusters franchise across decades, the speed of its creation becomes even more astonishing and noteworthy. Ray Parker Jr. didn't overthink the composition or second-guess his instincts endlessly. He kept the song simple, catchy, accessible, and instantly memorable to audiences of all ages. Sometimes the very best creative work happens when you trust your instincts completely and don't labor over every tiny detail obsessively for months on end. Parker understood intuitively what the song needed to be in order to serve the film, and he delivered it without unnecessary complexity or endless overthinking. This song became so iconic and recognizable that it's genuinely impossible to think of Ghostbusters without hearing those distinctive opening notes playing in your head automatically. It's been parodied countless times, imitated by other artists, and referenced in countless other films and television shows, yet it remains instantly recognizable and perfectly distinctive. That's truly the mark of genuinely great popular music. Something so perfect in its elegant simplicity that everyone remembers it forever across generations. Fact 5. Bill Murray's deadpan delivery was largely improvised. Much of Bill Murray's comedy in the film came from his ability to improvise on set and riff on the material provided to him. He would often play with the lines in the script, adding his own takes, different timing, unexpected reactions, and comedic flourishes to scenes that might have otherwise felt ordinary. Director Ivan Reitman allowed him considerable creative freedom to experiment during filming, recognizing that Murray's instincts were gold. Many of Murray's funniest and most memorable moments weren't written into the original script at all. They came from Murray's spontaneous choices, his instinctive understanding of comedy timing, and his keen awareness of audience expectations and what would get the biggest laugh. This improvisational approach gave Venkman a naturalistic quality that purely scripted dialogue alone probably wouldn't have achieved, no matter how well written the original material might have been. The character feels like a real person reacting to absurd situations, rather than an actor mechanically reciting lines from a page. The chemistry between Murray and the other actors was real and unforced, partly because they all had the creative freedom to play around with their dialogue and find new angles on familiar scenes. Harold Ramis and Ernie Hudson were equally willing to improvise and take chances, which created moments of genuine interaction and unexpected humor rather than mechanical line readings that felt stiff and rehearsed. This collaborative, improvisational approach is one of the primary reasons the film's performances still feel remarkably fresh and natural to audiences decades later, even as everything else about 1980s filmmaking looks dated. Fact 4. The proton packs weighed more than they looked. The Ghostbusters proton pack equipment was deceptively heavy in a way that most viewers never truly realized while watching the film. The actors had to wear fully functional, but completely inactive packs that weighed around 40 pounds each during the actual filming of scenes. This substantial physical burden actually added significantly to the authenticity and believability of their performances throughout the entire production. They weren't just pretending to carry heavy, cumbersome equipment through scenes. They were genuinely struggling and dealing with the weight of these devices with every movement, every gesture, and every step they took on set. Harold Ramis, Dan Aykroyd, Bill Murray, and Ernie Hudson all had to maintain reasonably good physical condition to handle multiple takes with those heavy packs strapped to their backs during long, exhausting shooting days that sometimes ran 12 hours or more. The fact that they carried real weight made their movements, their posture, their breathing patterns, and their overall physical presence in scenes feel undeniably more genuine and authentically real. The actors couldn't fake the effort. It was genuinely there to see on their faces and in their bodies. Audiences weren't necessarily conscious of what was making the performances feel so convincingly real and grounded, but the physical reality of the situation contributed enormously to the film's overall authenticity and believability. It's the kind of detail that separates good filmmaking from exceptional filmmaking. Fact 3. The Stay Puft Marshmallow Man suit cost more than many small houses. Creating the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man suit was extraordinarily expensive in ways that modern audiences might not fully appreciate or understand when they think about filmmaking budgets. The costume cost well over $100,000 to construct in 1984, equivalent to nearly $300,000 in today's money when you account for inflation. That was an absolutely enormous expenditure dedicated to a creature that appears on screen for only a few brief minutes. The suit was so massive, so towering, and so cumbersome that it could barely move effectively, requiring multiple trained operators and careful, precise choreography for every single scene it appeared in. Multiple different versions were actually created for different shots and sequences throughout filming, because the primary suit kept breaking down and suffering damage under the relentless stress of filming. Some versions were just enormous heads or partial bodies used for specific sequences, while other complete versions were full suits used for wide shots of the creature walking through the city. The suit damaged itself repeatedly during filming, constantly requiring repairs, maintenance, and restoration work between takes. Despite the absolutely enormous expense involved and the significant technical challenges inherent in bringing this massive creature to life, the filmmakers considered every penny spent to be money extremely well spent. They understood intuitively that this creature would become the film's most iconic visual moment, the image most strongly associated with the entire franchise, and something audiences would remember for decades to come. Fact 2. The Ghostbusters headquarters was a real firehouse. The actual Ghostbusters headquarters and base of operations wasn't a set that was carefully constructed and built in a studio backlot or on a soundstage somewhere. It was a genuine, authentic, working firehouse in Manhattan, specifically the Engine Company 8 Firehouse, located on the Upper West Side of New York City. The production team negotiated and got permission from the city to use the real building, and filmed extensively on location there rather than constructing elaborate sets elsewhere in a studio environment. This authentic location filming added something that's genuinely difficult to describe, but easy to feel. Something intangible and real and authentic to the production that sets built in studios or on sound stages might not have been able to capture, no matter how carefully they were designed and constructed. Real brick walls, authentic wood, genuine architectural details, and the authentic character and personality of an actual working firehouse made the space feel like a real, lived-in place where these characters genuinely lived and worked in every day, not a carefully constructed illusion. You can still visit that firehouse today, and it has become something of a pilgrimage site and destination for devoted and passionate Ghostbusters fans traveling from around the entire world. Fans stop by regularly to pay their respects to the location and to see where the magic actually happened, where scenes were filmed, and where this beloved story came to life. That real location, with all its authenticity and history, added a layer of authenticity that audiences could feel in their bones, even if they weren't consciously aware of exactly why the firehouse felt so genuine and real compared to typical movie sets. Fact 1. The final climax was shot over 6 weeks. The climactic sequence atop the apartment building where the Ghostbusters face off against the supernatural entity Gozer and the towering, stay-puffed Marshmallow Man was unquestionably the most complex, technically demanding, and time-consuming sequence in the entire film production from start to finish. The production spent 6 full weeks, month and a half of continuous work, shooting the finale, which only runs about 20 minutes on screen in the finished film that audiences see in theaters. This extended, grueling shooting schedule included all the practical special effects work, the complicated interactions with the ghosts and supernatural beings, the emotional performances of the actors, the intricate choreography, and the final confrontation with the towering marshmallow entity that dominates the skyline. The filmmakers wanted absolutely everything in this sequence to feel weighty, important, earned, and emotionally resonant because they understood this was the payoff to the entire story and all the careful setup that came before it throughout the film. Every single element had to be executed perfectly, from the practical effects work and the creature designs to the emotional authenticity of the performances and the overall pacing and rhythm of the sequence. 6 weeks of intensive shooting to produce 20 minutes of finished film footage might sound excessive or wasteful to some people. But when you're creating something this visually complex, this technically ambitious, and this fundamentally important to the entire narrative structure, that level of meticulous care and dedicated attention becomes not just necessary, but essential to getting it right. Those 15 facts really and truly show you how much work, creativity, innovation, and problem-solving went into making this film that has endured for so long. What's truly remarkable is that despite all the significant challenges, the immense complexity, and the genuine uncertainty along the way about whether various creative ideas would actually work when filmed, everything came together into something that feels genuinely timeless and transcendent. This movie has entertained families and delighted audiences for nearly 4 decades now, and it remains beloved because every single person involved in the production, from the writers who crafted the script, to the actors who brought characters to life, to the special effects team, to the production designers who built the world, cared deeply about getting every detail right. The dedication and craftsmanship that went into the real Ghostbusters is evident in every frame. It's why the film has aged so well, why it still makes people laugh and feel that sense of wonder and excitement. If you enjoyed learning these behind-the-scenes stories and fascinating facts about the real Ghostbusters, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more classic movie facts and trivia. We've got plenty more deep dives into the films that defined generations and shaped popular culture coming your way. So make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss them. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.